Welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege to read Parshas Chukas. And Chukas, like so many of these parashos, contains such a dramatic, overwhelming story. The story of Klal Yisrael finding themselves in a state of thirst. Miriam died, the miraculous well disappears. Klal Yisrael panics, not knowing what they're going to do for water. They turn to Moshe in a panicked, erratic state. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, all right, don't worry, go to the rock, speak to the rock, and the rock will bring forth water. But we know Moshe Rabbeinu goes ahead and hits the rock instead. He hits the rock, and although the desired result occurs, Klal Yisrael gets water, but the water came at a dramatic cost. Moshe Rabbeinu is punished, and Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Kadosh Baruch Hu that he will not enter into Eretz Yisrael. He will not lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Instead, he will die in the Transjordanian area, and Klal Yisrael will be led in by Yehoshua. And if you look at the pasuk itself says, this is in Perek Chaf, pasuk Yud Beis, because we're left trying to understand what was it exactly that Moshe Rabbeinu did wrong. In other words, remember, at the end of the day, it's clear that God brought about water, because whether Moshe spoke to the rock, hit the rock, either way, this is only coming about because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do so wrong? So if you look at the pasuk says, chapter 20, verse 12, Vayomer Shema Moshe b'al Aaron. Hashem says to Moshe and to Aaron, Ya'an lo ha'emantem bi. You did not fully believe in me. Lahakdisheni le'einei b'nei Yisrael, to consecrate me in the eyes of the Jewish people. Lachein lo saviu esakal hazeh el ha'aretz asher nasati lahem. Therefore, you will not bring the congregation, not bring the people into the land. Ya'an lo ha'emantem. You didn't believe. Didn't believe. You could say Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake. You could say Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. You could say a lot of things. But to say that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was there a greater Baal Emunah? Was there a greater person who possessed belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than Moshe Rabbeinu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, say whatever you want. You disobeyed. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu disobeyed. He was given an instruction to speak, and instead he hit. You disobeyed, and the punishment for that disobedience, I understand that, but you didn't believe in me. So the Medrash says something amazing. The Medrash says in the Alkut Shemoni, Amalu HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe. Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe the following, Haya lecha lilmod me Hagar. Moshe, you should have learned from Hagar, the wife, well, first the maidservant, then the wife of Avram Avinu. Dechsev vatera be'er mayim. Hagar, remember again, when she's cast out from the Abrahamic home, Sarah casts her out. She goes out with Yishmael, and a miracle occurred. Yishmael's dying of thirst in the desert. Hashem opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well. Vatera be'er mayim. U'ma'im yechidi shahayalo zechus Avram Aviv helisi lo be'er. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Moshe, if for Yishmael, all Yishmael had working for him was the schus, was the merit of Avram Avinu, and yet in that merit he was provided a well. Ultimately, Klal Yisrael, sheish lam schus avos, schus Torah, Klal Yisrael, which has so many more zechuyos, so many more merits, of course I'm going to take care of them. And it's a strange medrash. Moshe, you should have learned from Hagar. You should have learned from Hagar. Ultimately, just like I saved Yishmael, so ultimately I'll save Klal Yisrael. What's the connection? Perhaps what the Medrash is trying to teach us is as follows. We know the story, right? As I just mentioned before, Hagar is cast out of the home together with Yishmael. And the Torah says that they've ran through all of their water, all of their provisions. Hagar goes ahead and casts Yishmael underneath the thicket, some of the thorn bushes, to give him shade in his final moment. She thought he was going to die. And then what happens? The Gemara points out, Rashi quotes the Gemara that says, the Gemara Maseches Rosh Hashanah, that the Malachim see Yishmael about to die. And the Malachim say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let him die. Just let him die. Do you know what Yishmael's descendants are going to do to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people? Do you know how much pain, how much difficulty, how much bloodshed, how much violence Yishmael's children are going to visit upon the children of Klal Yisrael? Truth is upon the world. Just let him die. Let Yishmael die and prevent the nightmare from ever occurring. And the Ribono Shel Olam says something amazing. The pasuk says, "Vayishma kishama Elokim al kol hanar ba'asher hu sham." Hashem heard the cries of Yishmael where he was. HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds back to the Malachim, tell me, when you look at Yishmael now, did he do anything wrong? Is he zakai or chayiv? Is he innocent or guilty? And the Malachim, of course, were forced to say, he's innocent. He's innocent. Right now, he didn't do anything. He's innocent. Kadosh Baruch Hu said, I can only judge a person based on what they've currently done. So Kadosh Baruch Hu provides the miracle, provides a well for Yishmael. So perhaps what's happening over here is as follows. Do you know what Moshe Rabbeinu's mistake was? Okay, yes, the mistake was hitting the rock instead of going in and speaking to the rock, but on a deeper level. What was Moshe Rabbeinu's mistake? You see, when Moshe Rabbeinu addresses Klal Yisrael, he says to them, Shimuna Hamorim, listen, you rebellious ones. He labeled them. He labeled them. And he labeled them as bad, rebellious people. And the truth is that was incorrect. Klal Yisrael were doing something really bad in this moment. That's absolutely true. But Moshe Rabbeinu, are they bad through and through? Are they Rishaim? Are they truly rebellious ones? These are the people who just a little while ago said, Naseh v'nishma. Incredible, we will do, we will listen. Blind acceptance of Kala Torah Kula. These are the people who just a little bit before that were willing to go ahead and leave Mitzrayim. Zacharti la chesed rach. Hashem says, I remember the chesed that Klal Yisrael did. Lech teich acharai b'midbar. Klal Yisrael followed HaKadosh Baruch Hu out into the desert. 3.5 million people walked blindly after HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the desert. And so Moshe, you're calling them Morim? You're calling them rebellious ones? Right now they're doing something bad. But at the end of the day, Moshe, there's so much more to who they are and what they are than how they're acting in this present moment. See beyond the present. Don't judge them. Don't size them up based on just what they're doing right now. That, says the Medrash, was the mistake of Moshe Rabbeinu, characterizing Klal Yisrael as a rebellious nation. Really describing their entire identity, not in the totality of their experiences, but on one moment, one freeze frame, one action, one event, and that's wrong. And that's how the Medrash says, Moshe, you should have learned from Hagar. Should have learned from Hagar, right? Ultimately, not as much Hagar, but Yishmael. What happens? The Malachim want to kill Yishmael. Hashem says, look at Yishmael. When you look at him now, Malachim, you're looking in the future. You're looking in the future. Okay, he didn't do those things yet. So Lamaisa, right now, is he innocent or is he guilty? He's innocent. We have to let him live. It's almost like the reverse by Moshe. Moshe, you're looking at them in the present, but what about looking at them in the past? I understand they have mistakes in the past also. What about all of the great things that they've done in the past? What about all the accomplishments? What about all of the good? What about all the beautiful times? The Medrash is teaching us that the mistake of Moshe Rabbeinu is that he only saw Klal Yisrael through the lens of their current failure. He failed to see them in their totality. Ya'an lo ha'amantem, you didn't believe. You didn't believe. Not just you didn't believe in Klal Yisrael. Moshe, you have to believe in Klal Yisrael. Because if there's one thing that a leader has to have, it's a belief in his flock. It's a belief in his constituency. And even if they're presently failing, even if they're currently failing, see them in their totality and don't just judge them based on the freeze frame of the event that's unfolding in front of you now. Moshe Rabbeinu, just because they're rebelling right now does not mean they are a rebellious people. See them for the totality of who they are. And what an incredibly important yesod. What an incredibly important idea. You know, the Dubna Magid tells a mashal. And in the mashal he says that there was once a king. And the king had a son, but he wanted to make sure that his son was fit to rule. So he gives his son a very simple task. He says, I want you to go out into the kingdom and I want you to find for me a purely righteous individual. Son says, okay. He goes out, spends a couple weeks looking around, comes back to his father, said, Father, I'm so sorry. I could not find someone who was purely righteous. I could not find a person without fault. It was impossible. I found a lot of good people, a lot of wonderful people, but I couldn't find someone who was free of all blame, free of all fault. The king listens attentively, thinks, he says, I hear. Now I want you to go out and find someone who is truly evil. Go out and find someone who's truly bad, through and through. A person just does nothing good to them. So the son goes out, he goes, spends a couple of weeks, he comes back, he says, Father, I'm so sorry, I failed you again. And I went to all the places where you would expect to find the most rotten people. And, you know, I met them, and I said, wow, that's a rotten guy. And then I began to talk to them a little bit. And the truth is, I found that each and every one of them had something positive. Each and every one of them had something good. You had to work at it, you had to discover it a little bit, you had to work through all the layers of schmutz to be able to get there. But they had something good, they had something beautiful, they had something redeeming. The king looks at his son and says, now my dear son, you are fit to be king. Because to be king, you have to see your kingdom, your constituents, your followers in their totality. You can't just see them for what they are now. You have to see them for what they were and ultimately what they can become. Now you're ready to be king. And I think what an incredible lesson for us. And it's true in our relationships with others, because often it's natural. We have negative or caustic interactions with people. And the truth is, as a result of those interactions, we say, bad. That's a bad person. That's a bad individual. And again, to be clear, there are some people with whom it's not healthy to have a relationship with. But the question is, do I characterize a person as being negative just because of one interaction? And do I fail to see the totality of who and what they are? Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, said that when a child misbehaves, a parent should never say, you're a bad child. Because that's not true. There's no child who's bad. You can say to a child, you've done something that is bad. The action is bad, but the person is not. How many times does it happen in our interactions? Something negative happens, you're a bad person. Something negative happens, I judge you in your totality. Instead of saying, this is a freeze frame. This is one event that occurred, but it does not represent the totality of who and what you are. How many times does it happen with ourselves that we look at ourselves and all we see are our faults and our shortcomings? What about all the good? What about all the beauty? You have to see yourself in the entire continuum, the entire spectrum. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's broken, and I have a lot of stuff that has to be fixed. But you know what? I also have good. I also have positive. I also have redeeming things about myself. And to have a healthy sense of self, I have to be able to see myself in totality. And what about life? What about life? You know, sometimes something bad happens in life, and I allow that bad thing to color the entirety of my existence instead of realizing it's one bad thing. It's one difficult chapter. But the rest of life is beautiful. There are so many positive brachas, even when not everything is going well. This was the mistake of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Heilige Moshe Rabbeinu made one mistake, but a mistake that teaches us so much. We learn from Moshe, from his positives, and also from this particular mistake. Moshe looked at Klal Yisrael with tunnel vision. He saw them, you're rebellious. He judged them in their totality by where they were right now. We learn from Moshe Rabbeinu to avoid that. To avoid that in our relationship with others, to avoid that in our relationship with ourselves, and to avoid that ultimately in our relationship in terms of how we relate to our life circumstances. The greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, the missteps of Moshe Rabbeinu, teach us how to be successful people in this world. Wishing everyone a good Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.